Swara, thank you so much for taking your time to join me today. Wonderful seeing
No
you.
worries. Pleasure.
Swara, I want to first talk about your Twitter bio says this. It says more than Bollywood. And of course, you are. Tell me a little bit about what made you say more than Bollywood yourself.
Uh, well, I think that there is sort of I think that there is a prevalent stereotype about actors, especially actresses, that that we're just all about our films and our brand endorsements and our the glamour world, and that we're slightly insulated from what's happening in the world. And this is cause of criticism that sort of in the West and in India often is laid at the doorstep of actors. Um, and I just wanted to kind of, well, in my case, of course, that bio is a response to what everyone says about me, especially my trolls on Twitter. So it's actually it's not so much an introduction as a almost as a repartee. But yeah, I mean, I am more than Bollywood, and I think sometimes the more than part becomes sort of comes and overshadows the Bollywood part, balancing actively.
Hmm. And of course, as you have rightly said in your Twitter bio as well, you've introduced the vibrator to the silver screen. And you also have Rasbhari, which, it's interesting because I watched the first episode. I was like, okay, this is interesting. I like it. And by the end of the series, I really enjoyed myself. I really started to enjoy myself as things unfolded and the characters
Yeah.
developed. And we started to notice little things, the hypocrisy that we have attached to extramarital affairs, the sort of unfolding of sexuality at the same time, sort of, lots of prevalent societal ideologies that remain to this day. Tell me a little bit about how you came about Raspati and what made you say yes to it.
So I actually, it was quite funny. The producer and the creator Tanveer Bookwala offered me Rasbhari as we were both sitting in a very boring function, a Bollywood function, and we were like dying, and then we were just like talking to each other like what's happening and all that. And then he just kind of gave me this really quick synopsis, like right there while we were sitting there. And I was like, wow, that sounds really interesting. And I was like, what's it called? And he said Rasbhari. And I was like, but that sounds like a blue film. That sounds like a bizarre title. And he was like, no, just read the script. It's really interesting. And I was like, all right, send it. And in those days, it was actually, I was between shoots, so I had some time on me. So when he sent it, I began to read it. And like something like what you're saying, once I began to read it, I basically just read through because I was interested to know what's going to happen. And I like three things about it. The first you hit upon yourself, which is that I really like the breezy, easy way in which it's a satire on adolescent sexuality, which is something we don't see in Indian content too much or at all. And I thought it really looked at it in a very square in the face kind of way. Like it wasn't shying away from the fact that young kids are horny as hell. And, oftentimes the only thing that they're talking about and are obsessed about is sex and how to get laid. And I like we've seen that a lot in Hollywood content, but we've actually never seen that in Indian content. And I like the fact that this was a show that was actually dealing with that, but not only leaving it at the level of a sex comedy, because as you said, it's going deeper. So it is actually the journey of a young boy who starts off as a horny hormonal teenager and who actually is looking at his teacher only as an object and as a object of lust. But as he begins, it's his journey, it's his education actually. As he begins to get to know her, he begins to see her as a human being, and he begins to in respect, in regard, in honesty, right? I like that a lot. I like the satirical take on hypocrisy because I think that that's a big thing. I like the way in which it makes very clear how female sexuality and the sexuality of men are treated very differently in our society, which is again completely true. And I just really like the two characters and how different and distinct they were. And, to have the opportunity to play two such distinct characters in one show. I mean, it's basically like a double role. And that
Right.
was really interesting. Yeah.
When you delve into a character like Shanu, in your headspace, especially because you're sort of you have those two sides to that character, right? And there's an exploration of that issue as well. I hate to call it an issue because I mean it's a human it's a human thing, it's a human characteristic. Tell me a little bit about sometimes do you take away something from the character and do you start to explore it in your own personal life? Did that happen with this?
Well, I think that I think what I really liked about Shanu, which is something that I think is such a sexy quality to have in people, is when, you know, it's like she knows she's hot and she's well groomed and she presents herself well, but she's not invested in that. You know, she's not paying attention to it. She's really serious about her work. She's a committed teacher. She's a good teacher. She's really no nonsense. She's very upfront and straightforward, and she actually plays no games with her sexuality. She's not trying to do that. That's just the person she is. And I think that's such a nice, that's actually a great role model to have, you know, for young people, because we live in a world that is so invested in outward appearances, you know, and how there's so much stress on beauty and on how you look and so on. But here's a character who does have that all, but it's almost like she's like, her whole demeanor is like, this is not important, you know. And I like that quality about her. Rasbhari, of course, Rasbhari is a menace. She's a brat. But I think that kind of, I think it's nice for all of us have that kind of wild, untold, unabashed side in us. I think that Rasbhari's most biggest takeaway for audiences should be the fact that she actually, especially in India and in our cultures, I mean, I'm sure you all have experienced something similar there as well. There's so much shame around that cloaks the topic of desire. There is so much shame that surrounds our wants, our desires, especially if they're romantic or sexual. And I just love the way that she just like does not even like, she just like almost pulls the curtain on all that rubbish rhetoric about shame. And in one sweep, she just completely just dismisses it. And I thought that is actually something very liberating for a society as repressed, a culture as repressed as India often, or Indian culture can sometimes be, about sexuality and about desire. I like that a lot. She's also just really funny. Like you never know what she's going to do, you know. She's like a badass. It's like, I also like I like the way in which in the series itself, you can see that Shanu is being objectified by men and she's being treated as an object, right? Without her consent. And Rasbhari is doing the exact same thing to men. She's turning them into objects. It's almost like an exact reversal of the power dynamic between what men do to women and how she's just doing it to men. And I thought there's almost something radical in there, you know? I mean, you can't read it too deep, but I'm just saying that it's a nice reversal to see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you almost turn what we see we still see prevalent in mainstream cinema and mainstream just entertainment, which is turning an idea, you know, even with quote item songs, so to speak, you know, we're turning that and we're flipping it on its head and saying, okay, well, like, look at this side, right? And I find it interesting because, you know, you talked a little bit about, you know, exploring sexual desires, but with satire, with some comedy, and it's easy. It's funny because I was online and I was looking through a lot of the commentary surrounding it. There's a lot of positive commentary, but of course there's also criticism, and I think it comes from the conservative side, which is interesting because the conservative side, I'm sure, are also the ones who are engaging in watching a lot of the sex comedies that have made it big. I mean, I think of Kya Kool Hai Hum, and I mean, you know, a sequel came out to that film. Do you think that the hypocrisy that of course is shown in Rasbhari, do you think that viewers are ready for it, or do you think there is a certain segment of the audience that just needs to explore more, open up more?
I mean, I definitely think that what I find the most interesting in terms of the kind of responses that are coming to Rasbhari is that actually a lot of the critical responses, one, are based on actually not watching the show. They've just seen the trailer and they're just like shocked, and there's this whole thing about, oh, you know, In India, the teacher has a sacred sort of a position, right? The guru is considered God, and so that this is against Indian values. So there's that whole response, and then of course there is just the basic trolling, which is just like slut shaming and so on. And to me, all this kind of criticism is actually proving the point that the show makes, which is precisely that as a society, we have hypocritical standards for men and women. We do not question the sexuality of men when it's depicted on screen, whether in the form of male gaze, in the form of item numbers, in the form of the way in which our heroes are always shirtless and showing off their abs and whatnot. And that doesn't bother us. But the moment there is a representation of female sexuality that is slightly celebratory and positive or unabashed and uncontrolled, especially, that just gets our goat so bad. And the other thing I want to point out is that there is a deep hypocrisy, because the thing is that none of these people are bothered by when that sexuality is depicted as being raped, as being assaulted, as being eradicated, as being attacked, and ultimately as being possessed and controlled, even if by force and in a criminal manner, by men. So when that is the depiction, even if it's deeply fetishized, even if it's highly problematic, even if it's shot in a way that's actually serving to pleasure the male gaze, nobody has a problem with that. So you don't have a problem when the sexuality is being ultimately controlled by men. But when it's not in the service of the male gaze, or it is, but in the instance when it's just not in control by men, then we're like, oh my God, this is so wrong and this is so vulgar and this, no. You're exactly that same mentality that's in the show. I mean, there has been some constructive criticism as well, and I think some of those points are actually not even dealing with sex at all. They're talking about other issues in the web series, and that's interesting. But I think on the whole, everyone who's watched it has really got the show. They've enjoyed. I mean, it's a fun show at the end of the day. It's just like a light, breezy, fun look at adolescent sexuality, and it's a fun story with a little bit of a twist in the end, and some interesting things thrown in the middle, and there's a nice message to it. I mean, ultimately, the fact is that none comes of age, none is saved from becoming a really obnoxious, toxic, masculinity-laden, horny entitled man by his teacher, because she teaches him how to respect not just her, but the women around him. So yeah.
What was the most challenging aspect, perhaps the relationship that you have with the student in the web series? What was that like? Because I find it very fresh when I see young actors take on these kind of roles. First of all, it's hard enough anyway for them to get content-driven roles. What was the most challenging part for you?
In terms of playing the roles, or in terms of the particular relationship with the student?
Both.
Well, I think that with the two characters, I think the show does walk a very fine line in between being steamy but not sleazy, between being tantalizing but not catty, between titillating but not really being vulgar or obscene. So I was a little wary of that path, and I remember very clearly that there was a couple of places where I told the director, I don't think we should do this, because this will really seem, there's no way of saving this particular thing as from looking very vulgar, and there's no need for it. And I think that I was very lucky that Nikhil Bhatt, who's the director, was very conscious of these things, and he was very deftly able to play that quite well. But I was nervous about Rasbhari, because I was like, what is this person? What the hell is she doing? She's just like this really thirsty, ghost of a prostitute from an era bygone. What is this? Yeah, I think we managed. By giving her not just the personality of a sexy person, but and also, I mean, she's a caricature, right? So I just basically played into every stereotype that I think that this very society that fears her, but also desires her and lusts after her. What is our conception of a lustful, sex-hungry, thirsty woman? It's basically this, right? It's completely caricaturized, stylized depiction of such a person. we added a little fun elements to her by making her slightly, she's mischievous,
Mm.
and she's very witty, and she's like when she's in both the times when the people are trying to chant some prayers and like ward her off, and she
Oh,
moves
yes.
those prayers, and when with the exorcist, when he's trying, that jharu guy, when he's trying to hit her with a broom, and that whole scene. So I thought that let's add some more to her personality. Let's give her something else also, other than just this. She breathes sex, she eats sex, she's like everything about her sex. The only thing that made me feel like kind of like, oh my god, was like when I had to kiss the two students, and I was like, are you 18 years old? Show me your ID. Like, show me your ID. Are you 18? And he was like, yes, I'm 18, ma'am. And I was like, no, you show me your ID. So I was like, I'm not kissing an underage person, and having a criminal case put upon me. So I made sure that he was over 18. That everyone I kissed was over 18.
It is funny because that was one of the scenes where I was like, oh, like it sort of makes you sort of pause for a second, because you always do inner checks with yourself, right? What is making me uncomfortable? Why is this making me uncomfortable? But as I said, it's one of those things where as the series went on, you start to understand, you start to really see what the intention, I mean, yes, sort of like
are you talking about the last scene?
Yes.
Are you talking about? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I was also very like, wow, we really have to do this. But it was interesting because I think what they're trying to do is to actually, just like Shanu has given Nand, the student, something. She's given him a lesson in terms of teaching him about respect and about consent and about consent in a sort of way, and about honesty. What Rasbhari is really doing is that she is actually her gift to both Nand and Priyanka, the little girl, is actually that she is teaching the young people of India to set themselves free of this whole chains of shame, actually, that grip our psyche when it comes to desire. So she's actually, the first time I read it, I didn't like that scene at all, and I was like, why are we doing this? But then when I kind of applied myself to it, but also made it palatable for myself, I realized that it's actually, she's just being a catalyst. She's just sort of, she's taking to people who are standing on the brink of something and helping them into adulthood, in a mutual, consensual sort of way. So I told the director in that scene that, the one thing we have to be very clear about is that we have to see Rasbhari leave. That's very important, because we shouldn't make it seem like it was an orgy or it was like a threesome, or something like that. She's just being a catalyst. So I was very, very particular, and I think Nikhil did a really good job with that as well, of catching the angle where you see her turning and leaving and drawing the curtain and getting out of that. So it's clear that she's actually just left. She's done what she had to do. Her job is done, and she leaves. So small things like that we were very conscious of.
Today, given the situation that we're all in, I mean, Zoom video calls really weren't a thing, I would say. I mean, thankfully for technology, we're still able to have a chat like this. But where do you see yourself once the lockdown is done? I mean, I know that there are certain things being lifted. India is slowly coming out of the lockdown phase. What is the first thing you want to do?
Oh my God, I want to travel. I want to get the hell out of, I'm at home with my parents, which is great, and I love it. I want a vacation. I want to just randomly go to some other place. I want to be able to travel. I'm I cannot wait for the lockdown to finish. I am getting on a flight and I'm just going anywhere in the world where it's somewhat safe to travel, because it just feels like, I don't know, it just feels like we've been caged, and as you said, thank God for technology, because I cannot imagine what we would have done without.
For sure. Swara, thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate it.